Okay, picture this. January 2025. It's a presidential inauguration.
Mm-hmm.
But the people on stage, they're not quite who you'd expect. Right there, shoulder to shoulder with the president, you've got Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk.
Wow.
Yeah. And just a few feet away, other tech giants, people who, had actually slammed this politician before. Now they're there celebrating. It's this striking image the book opens with.
It really is.
And it just makes you stop and think.
Yeah.
What does it actually mean when that line between huge wealth and political power gets so visible?
That image, it's from a really compelling new book, and it sets the stage perfectly for what we're exploring today. We're digging into the haves and have-yachts.
Yep.
And we're going to pull out the most important insights, look at this surprising world of extreme wealth, how it impacts society, and maybe even the anxieties hiding underneath it all. Think of it as, a shortcut to getting informed on this really fascinating topic.
Exactly. And as we dive in, remember, this is all part of our commitment to sparking reflection, rational thought. We do more of this over on our YouTube channel with Mindful Moments, using AI for book analysis to help you process these big, complex ideas.
So let's unpack that inauguration scene from the book a bit more. It's not just a picture, right? It feels like a symbol of a new era where political power is openly embracing, plutocracy.
Ruled by the wealthy.
Exactly. The fact that these specific billionaires, Bryn, Cook were there too, apparently, were on the stage, while congressional leaders were down in the audience, that shows a huge shift.
Yeah.
And the book argues this shift really got turbocharged by that 2010 Supreme Court decision, the one that basically removed limits on political contributions. Suddenly, candidates didn't need lots of rich donors. They just needed a few ultra-rich ones.
Who could give way more and maybe expect more in return.
Precisely. That indirect influence is huge, but the book also shows how it becomes much more direct, almost transactional.
Okay, so what are the really standout examples of that kind of direct exchange?
Well, the book gives some pretty eye-popping ones. Trump reportedly telling oil execs, basically, raise me $1 billion and I'll get rid of drilling restrictions.
Well, that's straight up.
That's the report. Or look at Elon Musk. The book cites his $288 million investment in political campaigns. What happened next? A $54 billion jump in his shares in just 1 week after the election.
54 billion.
Billion. With a B. So, it's not just lobbying anymore. It's like a direct financial return on political spending. It totally changes the game, and you have to ask what it does to, democracy.
That return is just unbelievable. What's the bigger picture here? Is this level of wealth accumulation really new, according to the book?
It really seems to be. The book finds that the total wealth of American billionaires more than doubled between Trump's 2 inaugurations.
Doubled.
Yeah. And it says this actually surpasses the Gilded Age, the Vanderbilts and Rockefellers. What makes it so stark, I guess, is the contrast. This massive wealth boom happened while things like homelessness were rising and environmental problems were getting worse. It points to this huge disconnect.
Yeah, that disconnect. And speaking of that, let's talk about conspicuous consumption. The book uses gig yachts as the ultimate example. Why yachts?
Gig yachts. They're presented as basically the most expensive things humans have ever owned. Their main purpose, to absorb the most excess capital.
Absorb capital.
Yeah. They're floating palaces, really. And the environmental cost is enormous. The book mentions one yacht can produce as much greenhouse gas as maybe 1,500 cars.
1,500.
That's the figure cited. And people notice. Remember the backlash when Jeff Bezos' yacht needed that historic bridge in Rotterdam temporarily dismantled?
Oh, yeah, I remember that. People were furious.
Totally. There was a Facebook group planning to throw rotten eggs. They ended up not dismantling the bridge, at least for now. It shows there's a real tension there.
Definitely. So beyond yachts, what other kinds of status symbols does the book talk about? How else does this culture of excess show up?
Well, it's about experiences, too, not just things. The author, Evan Osnos, writes about Leonardo da Vinci's Salvator Mundi, the most expensive painting ever sold, reportedly hung on a Saudi crown prince's yacht, despite the risks from, humidity and temperature changes, which are terrible for old paintings.
Oh, man.
And then there's this whole industry of experiential yachting for, quote, bored billionaires. They stage historical sea battles with, haptic feedback and the smell of gunpowder. Seriously. Or they create temporary 3D printed restaurants on sandbanks in the Maldives that vanish after a few hours. Just incredibly bespoke, unique experiences.
That extends to entertainment too, right? The book mentions these private concerts with massive price tags.
Oh, absolutely massive. Florida. His fee for a 30-minute bar mitzvah set can be anywhere from $150,000 up to $1 million internationally.
Half an hour.
Yep. And the Eagles supposedly got $6 million just to play Hotel California once.
Wow.
And it's all super secretive, NDAs, no photos, no social media. But sometimes that secrecy barely covers up, ethical issues. The book mentions Jennifer Lopez performing in Turkmenistan for a leader described as a repressive despot.
Oof.
Yeah. She apologized, said her team didn't vet it properly regarding human rights concerns. But it raises questions, right, about where artists draw the line and for whom.
Okay, so we've seen the outside, the spectacle, but the book digs into the inside world, too, and finds this paradox. Extreme wealth, but also extreme anxiety. Tell us about this survivalism.
It's a really jarring contrast, isn't it? This idea of prepping taking hold among the super rich in Silicon Valley, New York. They have all this money, but not necessarily peace of mind.
Right.
There's Antonio Garcia Martinez, former Facebook guy. He bought 5 acres out in the Pacific Northwest. Why? He apparently told the author he thought a local militia might be needed for survival. He felt like society was skating on really thin cultural ice.
Wow. That's intense. Are there specific examples of how this prepping plays out for the super rich?
Oh, yeah. New Zealand seems to be the ultimate bug-out location.
New Zealand, why there?
Well, it's remote, stable, perceived as safe. Buying a house in New Zealand, the book says, became this kind of code phrase among the wealthy. Residency applications surged after Trump's election over 13,000.
13,000.
Yep. American clients asking specifically for helipads, wanting locations safe from rising sea levels. Some are building in these incredibly exclusive, isolated communities. And if that's not enough, there's a survival condo project.
Okay, what's that?
It's a luxury bunker built inside an old ICBM missile silo in Kansas.
You're kidding.
Nope. Pool, rock climbing wall, a dog park, even LED windows that can show Central Park views complete with taxi sounds for the residents missing New York.
That is wild.
Yeah.
What are they actually afraid of? What's driving this level of preparation?
It seems to be a few core things. Fears about AI taking jobs and causing a backlash against tech elites. Worries about civil unrest, maybe the collapse of institutions they rely on.
Mm-hmm.
Robert A. Johnson, a former hedge fund manager quoted in the book, worried that if fake news leads to fake evidence, the whole system of contracts breaks down, which, for people whose wealth depends on enforceable contracts, is like an existential threat.
So it's a deep unease about the foundations of society. But does everyone in that world buy into this doom scenario?
Oh.
Does the book offer a counterpoint?
It does, yeah. Stuart Brand offers a different take. He's older, seen a lot, and he's more struck by how resilient society actually is.
Okay.
He points out, we got through the 2008 financial crisis, Ebola scares, the Fukushima disaster in Japan, all without society completely falling apart.
That's true.
His worry is that this elite escape fantasy, this prepping, actually undermines the larger circle of empathy we need to solve problems together. He basically asks, what if things don't collapse? What if civilization just keeps chugging along?
That's a really important question. What if the focus should be on fixing things, not escaping them? Which brings us to how this wealth is protected. What's the wealth defense industry?
Right. This is a key part of the book. It's this huge, mostly invisible industry, lawyers, accountants, advisors, controlling something like $6 trillion globally. That's way more than hedge funds manage.
$6 trillion.
Yeah. And their main job, essentially, is to minimize taxes for the ultra-rich. The book points out this big historical shift. You had Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes saying, taxes are what we pay for civilized society.
A classic line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But now, the average tax rate for the top 0.01% has dropped by more than half, down to around 30%. Meanwhile, for the bottom 90%, it's actually edged up slightly to about 25%.
So the very wealthiest are paying a significantly lower rate than they used to, while others pay slightly more. How do they do it? The book mentioned some complex strategies.
Oh, incredibly sophisticated strategies. Things like portfolio loans. You use your stocks as collateral to get cash. It's a loan, technically, so you don't pay income tax on it. It's clever.
Then there's the angel of death loophole. When you die, the cost basis of your assets gets stepped up to the current market value. So your heirs inherit it, and all the capital gains that happen during your lifetime, poof, tax obligation gone.
Wow. And business loopholes, too.
Yep. Owning racehorses, race cars, cattle ranches, these can allow for huge write-offs on investment losses. Plus, there are loopholes for things like upgrading private jets.
And grats. Grantor retained annuity trusts. They sound important.
They're huge. The book calls them simple and easy to repeat. Basically, you put assets expected to appreciate, like stocks, into a trust for a short time. You get back the initial value plus a tiny bit of interest as an annuity. Anything the assets earn above that low interest rate, it passes to your heirs, usually kids, completely tax-free.
Tax-free.
Tax-free. The book cites casino magnate Sheldon Adelson using GIRAs to reportedly avoid maybe $2.8 billion in taxes.
$2.8 billion. Yeah, and there's this culture of silence around it. Marlena's son, who managed money for the Getty family, talked about meticulously counting days the sisters spent outside California to avoid the state's high income tax. She called it an unspoken omerta in finance, operating in that gray area between the letter and the spirit of the law.
An omerta.
Yeah.
Like the mafia code of silence. Does the book suggest this is part of a bigger ethical slide in finance?
It seems to point that way. John C. Bogle, the Vanguard founder, is quoted mourning the loss of a standard where there are some things that one simply doesn't do. He felt it got replaced by, well, if everyone else is doing it, I can too.
Right.
And the book mentions that infamous Goldman Sachs executive calling clients Muppets. It suggests a kind of cynicism creeping in, where profit trumps ethics.
And when ethics erode that much, sometimes it tips over into outright crime, right? The book tells the story of Zach Horowitz.
Yeah, that story is chilling. He ran this massive $690 million Ponzi scheme based around fake Hollywood film deals.
Fake deals.
Totally fake. He showed investors fabricated emails and texts, supposedly from execs at Netflix and HBO, promising huge returns. Lived this incredibly lavish life. But the author suggests his motivation wasn't just money, it was also about the applause, the status.
Applause.
Yeah, and the impact on his victims was just devastating. People lost their life savings, had to come out of retirement. One person apparently considered suicide. It really shows the human cost when that pursuit of validation goes criminal.
That's brutal. The book also touches on political influence being used almost as a shield with this idea of gray mail. Tell us about Guo Wengui.
Guo Wengui, yeah. He was this exiled Chinese billionaire living in the U.S. under FBI investigation. But he was also cultivating powerful Republican allies, making all these wild accusations against Chinese leaders. Even tried to sell passports for a supposed government in exile.
So gray mail is...
It's basically threatening to release sensitive information, maybe national security secrets, if you get prosecuted. It makes pursuing a case against someone really messy, really complicated for the government. It's a way powerful people can try to leverage secrets to avoid accountability.
Which leads to this idea of ethics rehab and how the system handles white-collar crime.
Yeah.
What did Andy Grant find after his own prison time?
Andy Grant, he's a disbarred lawyer who did time for wire fraud. He started something called the White Collar Support Group, basically ethics rehab, as he calls it.
Okay.
His insight is that the very traits that drive people to huge success, like aggression, bending rules, are often the same things that lead to their downfall. And the book also cites research showing that the more remote crime feels, the easier it is to commit. Like, if you don't see your victims, there's a psychological distance.
Right, it doesn't feel as real. Gordon Kaplan, the lawyer from the college admissions scandal, he also had observations about the system itself.
Yeah, Kaplan apparently found prison to be a system built for failure, built for recidivism. He said there was little real job training or rehabilitation. And even though he admitted his own drive for achievement was like a drug, he started advocating for reform, pointing out how hard it is for nonviolent felons to rebuild their lives.
And yet, the book notes legal standards might actually be getting more lenient for some white-collar offenses.
It mentions a 2024 Supreme Court decision that seemed to narrow the definition of bribery, making it harder to prosecute officials who receive gratuities unless there's a very clear, explicit quid pro quo agreement beforehand. It overturned the conviction of a mayor who took a $13,000 payment after helping a company get a contract. So yeah, it suggests the legal hurdles for prosecuting some of these cases might be getting higher.
Okay, so after looking at all these complex, sometimes dark dynamics, does the book offer any sense of hope? Pathways towards something better?
It definitely does. It looks back at historical figures like Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller.
The original Gilded Age titans.
Right. They amassed enormous wealth, sometimes ruthlessly, but eventually they shifted focus to philanthropy aimed at systemic change. Carnegie with public libraries, Rockefeller funding the University of Chicago. The book quotes Rockefeller realizing that what people most seek cannot be bought with money. It shows a model where vast wealth can be redirected towards broad public good.
So there's precedent, but can society actually reverse extreme wealth concentration?
Yeah.
Does the book mention anything like a Great Compression?
Yes, exactly. It brings in Peter Turchin's historical analysis. Turchin warns about instability when wealth gets too concentrated, but he also identifies periods he calls the Great Compression, where societies did manage to reduce inequality and prevent collapse.
How?
Through conscious effort, policy changes, social movements, it suggests that societies can kind of relearn lessons and actively choose a more balanced path. It's not inevitable that things just get more unequal.
And Robert A. Johnson's idea of stewardship.
Yeah, he comes back in here. His belief presented in the book is that if the wealthy embraced more of a spirit of stewardship, combined with policies like, say, more aggressive inheritance taxes, it could take an awful lot of sting out of society. It could help rebuild trust and revitalize public institutions.
So the underlying message seems to be that understanding all this, the power, the anxiety, the mechanisms, the history, it empowers us, empowers you listening, to think more critically about these huge societal challenges.
Absolutely. It's been quite the journey through this book, hasn't it? The visible power, the hidden anxieties, those tough moral questions, and these glimmers of potential change through stewardship.
It really has. And if you want to keep exploring these kinds of ideas, remember to check out Mindful Moments over on our YouTube channel. Plus, you can find more in-depth analyses like this one on our podcasts, wherever you get your shows.
Yeah, definitely subscribe so you don't miss future explorations. And if this discussion got you thinking, maybe share it with a friend, someone else who likes to really dig into complex topics.
And if you want to go straight to the source, consider grabbing a copy of the book, The Haves and Have-Yachts by Evan Osnos. There's a link in our description. Buying through that link helps support us in bringing you these conversations.
So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. What does being well-informed really mean today, especially when we see this clash between extreme wealth and maybe the health of society?
Yeah.
How could our idea of success change if we started valuing shared well-being as much as individual accumulation?